What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Yesterday at EA Play Live, we got our first look at the gameplay for Star Wars Squadrons. This new starfighter simulator by Motive Montreal is set to release on October 2nd of this year, and although the gameplay reveal looked great, the real juicy information came after the reveal, when Polygon sat down with the creative director from Motive, Ian Frazier, and got him to talk about some information about Squadrons that we did not know before. He talks a little bit about how the combat works, what the inspirations for the game were, and even a little bit about future DLC plans, so be sure you stick around until the end of the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up too if you like it, and consider subscribing if you want to see more Squadrons videos like this. So now let's get into this interview. The whole thing lasted roughly a half hour, and I'll have the transcript of the whole thing linked below in the description if you want to read it for yourself. But for today's video, we're just going to go over the finer points that Ian talked about regarding gameplay, combat, and future DLC plans. He opens by talking about how Squadrons is first and foremost inspired by World War II aerial combat footage, in the same way that George Lucas took that inspiration for the original Star Wars. That's what gives Squadrons the authentic Star Wars feel. On top of that, they also took inspiration from previous titles such as Rogue Squadron, X-Wing, and TIE Fighter, and since Motive also worked on Battlefront 2, the Starfighter Assault game mode worked as a great baseline for the new game. Squadrons actually takes what Starfighter Assault started and expands on it in more ways than one. First of all, Ian talks about how there is no leading reticle for enemy ships. In Battlefront 2 and Starfighter Assault specifically, enemy ships have a leading reticle. That's that circle that you see flying ahead of them that tells you where you need to lead your shots. This does not exist in Squadrons, and the reason they did not include it is simply for immersion purposes. They want you to be immersed in the world and not be distracted by little tiny things on the HUD. You, however, will still get a personal aiming reticle that shows you where your shots are going to go. This was just disabled during the gameplay reveal so that, again, you would not be distracted by little things and you could take in everything the trailer was trying to show you. Another way Squadron sets itself apart from Starfighter Assault is how it counters the death loop. The death loop in Starfighter Assault is basically when you are chasing an enemy ship and they are chasing you and you're just flying in endless circles and no progress gets made. The way Motive countered this is by giving the starfighters different maneuvers that they can do, such as a drift maneuver, or give them a boost of speed that can put some serious distance between you and your target. At the end of the day though, it always comes down to your skill as a pilot, and based on what Ian talks about regarding the combat, it sounds like it's going to be pretty in-depth and will definitely require a good amount of skill to be good at. Ian talks about how each ship has 3 core systems: engines, weapons, and shields. Not all ships have shields, however, such as the TIE Fighter, and the reason for this is simply for in-lore explanations. In the movies and in any canon material, TIE Fighters have not had hyperdrives or shields. For that reason, the TIE Fighters in Squadrons will not have shields either. To make up for that, they get their own special ability, and we'll talk about that ability in just a second. For now, let's focus on these 3 main systems: engines, weapons, and shields, and talk about what they do. It's pretty self-explanatory what they do, especially if you're a Star Wars fan, but the way they work in combat is like this. You get to divert power from your starfighter to these core 3 systems, and you give them boosts when you need them most in the heat of combat. Diverting power to the engines will increase your speed and affect your ability to turn, while diverting power to the lasers will make them recharge faster. Diverting power to the shields will make them regenerate faster, and the cool thing about the shields is that they can be rerouted to either the front or the back of the ship, depending on which side needs more protection in that moment. This harkens back to the classic Star Wars, especially scenes with Han Solo flying the Millennium Falcon and instructing Chewie to divert power to the engines or to the forward lasers. It's really authentic, and I'm liking how this sounds a lot. Ian talks about how diverting power to these core systems is only the start, and the real fun begins when you max out the power on any of these 3 systems. By maxing out the power on the lasers, you basically send them into overcharge, and you do extra damage when you build up a second heat bar. By maxing out the power to the engines, it gives them a temporary super speed boost, but it drains afterburner fuel as a result. By maxing out the power to the shields, you basically get a double layer of shield all around your ship, and you can divert this extra layer, like I said, to either the front or the back, and maintain extra protection on that side while still having protection on the other. This power diversion and keeping track of what systems have how much power sounds like it will be a central theme in combat for squadrons, and is something that we're going to have to get used to if we want to get good at the game. Some ships sound like they will provide good practice for players to do this though, ships like the TIE Fighter which don't have shields, and this is because of their special ability I talked about earlier to make up for the lack of shields. This is called quick power conversion, which rapidly reroutes power between systems. This makes me think that the ships that do have shields will only be able to reroute power between systems relatively slowly in comparison to the TIE Fighter, for example. The downside to using this quick power conversion ability is that it debuffs the system losing power for a few seconds. For example, if you reroute power from your lasers to your engines will get a very quick speed boost, but you will not be able to shoot your lasers for a couple of seconds while that debuff is active. Likewise, rerouting from your engines to your lasers will give your lasers tremendous recharge ability, but your engines will just go putt-putt for a couple of seconds and you'll be a sitting duck. This quick power conversion ability allows the starfighter and the pilot to do some more unpredictable things, and sounds like a decent counter to the more defensive ships that have the shields. Another aspect of combat, and possibly a bigger one than the power diversion, are the different components that you can put on your ship, which allows for pretty heavy modifications from the standard model. For example, in the reveal trailer for Squadrons, there is a sequence where a few TIE bombers are attacking a rebel capital ship, and they're using what looks like a beam cannon. Standard TIE bombers do not have beam cannons, but in Squadrons, this is actually a component that you can attach to your ship and give it a beam cannon. Ian says that this specific component is actually available for both factions, which implies that there are some components that are exclusive to one faction or the other. Some components appear to give your shield an upgrade, and obviously ships that don't have shields will not be able to use that component. Based on the gameplay reveal, it looks like at the start, your starfighter will be able to have 3 different components that you can customize it with, but Ian says that as you progress in the game, that number will rise up to 7. 7 different component slots per starfighter in a squadron of 5 starfighters makes for 35 possible different components out in the battlefield at any one time. That's a lot of different stuff to keep track of at once, and it sounds like this is what's going to provide variation between matches. The 3 to 7 components that you have attached to your ship are what you can consider your loadout, and the individual components that you can choose from are more or less the equivalent of star cards in Battlefront 2. They don't work the same way. Ian says that it's not a matter of, oh, this component will give your laser 5% more damage. It's a little bit more in-depth than that, and not tied to progression like the star cards are in Battlefront 2, where they come in tiers from common all the way to epic. Like everything else in Squadrons though, these components will be unlockable strictly through gameplay, so it just comes down to you the player and how much time and dedication you want to put into it, and you'll reap the rewards as a result. This kind of segues into the last point I wanted to make, and it's something that a lot of players were wondering about going into this game. Since it's set only in the original trilogy, that begs the question, could we see more content from other eras, such as the prequel or sequel eras? Ian was asked flat out if we can expect DLC in the future for Squadrons, and this is what he had to say about that. What we're trying to do is make a game that's a little bit old school in its mentality. You give us your $40, we give you the game. It's a fully self-contained experience. It's the whole game. So at this point, we're not talking about live service or DLC or anything else. Not saying it's impossible, but that's really not what we're going for. And I'll be honest, as a player, I actually kind of appreciate that. I'm an old school gamer. I grew up on N64 and the classic PlayStation 2, so I do miss the days where you can just buy a cartridge or disc, pop it in, and that's the game right there. You don't have to worry about download times or installing future updates. You pay them the money and you get the full experience right there. So I do appreciate this to a certain extent, although this does make me wonder if they won't add future patches if for some reason there's a bug or a glitch in the game. I'm sure they would patch it if that were the case. Based on this though, it doesn't sound like we will be getting more ships or ship classes in the future. The 4 ship classes that are currently in the game, the Fighter, Interceptor, Support, and the Bomber, sounds like those will be the 4 that we're going to stick with for the rest of the game's life cycle. It's got a decent roster so far. It's got the classic ships, the X-Wings, the TIE Fighters, and it's even got some newer stuff from Rogue One, such as the U-Wing and the TIE Reaper. This does set a precedence for introducing a new class and new ships, such as maybe the B-Wing and the TIE Defender from Rebels. Ian even said that the beam cannon that we talked about earlier in the video was inspired by the B-Wing in Rebels that used a beam cannon in much the same way. So like Ian said, it's not impossible that we might get future ships, but highly unlikely, and I definitely would not hold my breath for it until they make an announcement that confirms more or less we will be getting more content. The vanilla game isn't even out yet though, so we still have a couple more months before we get to enjoy the launch. But that really is all the key information that I could pick out from this interview with Ian Frazier. It was really insightful, and once again, I'll have it linked below in the description if you want to read the whole thing for yourself. It's roughly a 15 to 20 minute read, so set some time aside for it if you're interested. But with that, that's going to do it from me. If you made it this far into the video, in a comment below, write down what the TIE in TIE Fighter stands for, TIE. And I'll give you a hint, it's not because the TIE Fighter looks like a bow tie, although that is just a funny coincidence. I appreciate everybody who stopped by the channel to check out the video. Once again, if you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment with your thoughts below. And consider subscribing to the channel to stay in the loop with more Star Wars Squadrons videos and news as we get it. I appreciate you stopping by the channel, pilots. I'll see you out in the skies. Peace.